It was a single object, out of place in a world of decaying leaves and damp earth. A Canon EOS 5D Mark II camera body. It lay half buried in the soil, its black magnesium alloy frame fractured, the lens mount twisted into a grimace of metallic ruin. A jogger, cutting through a section of unofficial trail deep within the Mount Hood National Forest, had nearly stepped on it. He stopped, curious. This was expensive equipment, not the kind of thing someone carelessly drops. He nudged it with the toe of his trail runner. The camera was smashed. Not from a fall, it seemed. The damage was too violent, too deliberate. The memory card slot was open, and it was empty. This is the story of a man who walked into the woods and never walked out. It is the story of a case that began with a frantic search, pivoted on a piece of broken technology, and then slowly, painstakingly, fell into silence. It is a story not of a dramatic capture or a satisfying confession, but of the vast, hollow space left behind when the narrative simply stops. It is the story of Daniel Hayes and the 2-decade echo of his absence. For the investigators and the family he left behind, it was a puzzle with too many pieces missing, a wound that never found the closure of a scar. Daniel Hayes was 34 years old. He was an architect, a man who thought in lines, angles, and structures. His world was one of precision and planning, of turning abstract concepts into tangible, livable spaces. He had recently moved to Portland, Oregon, drawn by the city's reputation for innovative design and its proximity to the untamed beauty of the Pacific Northwest. He was, by all accounts, a man of quiet virtues. He was kind, possessed of a dry, observational wit that revealed itself only to those he trusted. He was dedicated to his craft, often losing hours in the quiet intensity of drafting and design at the small, boutique firm of Renfield and Associates on Southwest 3rd Avenue. He was not a man who courted chaos. His life was a testament to order. His apartment in the Pearl District was minimalist and tidy, each book on its shelf, each piece of furniture chosen with an architect's eye for form and function. He was the product of a stable, loving upbringing in suburban Ohio, the son of 2 librarians who had instilled in him a deep respect for knowledge and a calm, methodical approach to life. He was close to his younger sister, Sarah, a teacher who lived back in Cleveland. They spoke every Sunday, a ritual neither of them ever missed. Daniel was, in short, the kind of person who seemed insulated from the world's sharp edges. He was a good man, building a good life. But cities can be lonely places, even for those who build them. Daniel's move to Portland in the spring of 2009 was a professional triumph, but a personal reset. He had left behind a network of friends and a long-term relationship that had ended amicably, but definitively a year prior. In Portland, he had his work. He had his apartment. He had the polite, professional acquaintanceships of the office. What he lacked was connection. The easy camaraderie of a shared history was 3,000 miles away. He felt the absence keenly, a low-grade hum of isolation beneath the surface of his busy, structured days. He was a man surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone, a common ailment of modern urban life. It was this quiet craving for community that led him to the internet. Not to dating apps, but to forums dedicated to his newfound hobby, hiking. The colossal green presence of the Oregon wilderness was a stark, beautiful contrast to the flat landscapes of his youth. It called to him. He started small, with day trips to Forest Park and the Columbia River Gorge. He bought good boots, a waterproof jacket, and a state-of-the-art GPS unit. He found a sense of peace on the trail, a clarity that the city, for all its creative energy, could not provide. He wanted to share it. He discovered a forum called PNW Ascents, a simple text-based website for hiking enthusiasts across the Pacific Northwest. It was an active community, a digital lodge where people shared trail conditions, gear reviews, and photos from their excursions. Daniel, using the anonymous handle ArchHiker, began to participate. He asked questions about local trails. He posted a few of his own photos, crisp, well-composed shots of waterfalls and mountain vistas. The forum was welcoming. Users with names like Trail Runner X, Peak Seeker, and Cascadia Gal offered advice and encouragement. For Daniel, who was naturally reserved, this digital space felt safe. It was connection without the immediate pressure of face-to-face interaction. There was no grooming process, no sinister figure singling him out for manipulation. The forum was simply what it appeared to be, a gathering of people who loved the mountains. Daniel's involvement was organic. He became a regular contributor, his posts thoughtful and appreciative. He learned about challenging trails he would have never found on his own. The interactions were friendly, focused on the shared passion for the outdoors. He felt, for the first time since moving to Portland, a sense of belonging. These anonymous screen names became his community. The escalation from digital to physical was a natural one within the context of the group. Smaller, informal meetups were common. A few users might decide to tackle a trail together on a Saturday. Daniel, for several months, resisted these invitations. His natural caution held him back, but as he read the trip reports from these small group hikes, complete with cheerful photos of people standing on summits, his resolve began to soften. They seemed like normal, friendly people. His first in-person meeting was unremarkable, which is precisely what made it so reassuring. He joined a small group of 4 other forum members for a moderate 6-mile loop hike near Government Camp. They met in the parking lot of a well-trafficked trailhead. They were just people, a dental hygienist, a software engineer, a retired couple. They talked about gear and weather and the aches in their knees. They were their online personas brought to life, friendly, knowledgeable, and passionate about hiking. The day was a success. Daniel felt a profound sense of relief. The anxiety that had coiled in his stomach on the drive up had completely dissolved by the time they were back at their cars. This positive experience became a template. Over the next few months, Daniel went on 3 more group hikes, each time with a slightly different mix of people from the forum. He was no longer just ArchHiker. He was Daniel. He learned their real first names, their professions, the small details of their lives. The wall of digital anonymity was crumbling, replaced by genuine, if new, friendships. His confidence grew. He was part of something. The red flags, when they appeared, were nearly invisible. They were not alarms, but faint, discordant notes in an otherwise pleasant melody. The planning for the next hike, an ambitious 3-day trek through a more remote section of the Mount Hood National Forest, took place in a private message thread on the forum. The group was to be small, just Daniel, Trail Runner X, and Peak Seeker. Daniel had met Trail Runner once before, the software engineer. Peak Seeker was a new face, but he was a legend on the forums, a highly experienced mountaineer whose trip reports were epic and inspiring. In the planning thread, the details were vague. Peak Seeker, the de facto leader for this trip, was resistant to setting a rigid itinerary. "The best trips are the ones that let the mountain decide the path," he wrote. He deflected questions about a specific route, preferring to keep their options open. He also avoided sharing his real name or any personal details, unlike the others Daniel had met. He kept the conversation strictly to gear, weather windows, and meeting times. Daniel, caught up in the excitement of a challenging expedition with a seasoned expert, rationalized it. This was how serious mountaineers operated. They were adaptable, fluid. The lack of personal information was just a quirk, a desire to maintain the mystique of his online persona. Confirmation bias was a powerful force. Daniel wanted to trust these people, and so he did. He saw expertise where he might have seen evasion. He saw mystique where he might have seen secrecy. The warning came from the one person who knew him best. During his regular Sunday call with his sister, Sarah, he described the upcoming trip with palpable excitement. He talked about the challenging terrain, the chance to push his skills. Sarah listened, then asked a simple question. "That sounds amazing, Dan. Who are you going with?" "A couple of guys from the hiking forum," he said. "One of them, this guy they call Peak Seeker, is basically a professional. He's climbed everything in the state." "What's his name?" Sarah asked. There was a slight pause. "I don't actually know," Daniel admitted with a small laugh. "Everyone just calls him by his screen name. It's kind of a thing on there." The line was quiet for a moment. "Dan, are you sure that's a good idea?" Sarah's voice was laced with a gentle concern that was characteristic of her. "Going into the wilderness for 3 days with a complete stranger. Do you even know these people's real names?" Daniel became defensive, a rare thing for him. "It's not like that, Sarah. I've met one of them before. They're just serious hikers. It's a different culture. You wouldn't get it." He was dismissive, not out of malice, but out of a desire to protect this new, exciting part of his life from outside skepticism. He saw her concern as an attack on his judgment, on the community he had worked so hard to find. The conversation moved on, but the question hung in the air, unheeded. It was the last conversation Daniel would ever have with his sister. It was a warning he would dismiss. It was the last decision he would ever make. The lure was the promise of adventure. On the morning of Friday, October 9th, 2009, Daniel Hayes drove his dark green 1999 Subaru Forester east on Highway 26. The city of Portland receded in his rearview mirror, replaced by the dense, towering firs of the Oregon foothills. He was headed for the Salmon River trailhead, a remote entry point into the sprawling wilderness south of Mount Hood. This was the designated meeting spot. This was his entry into a controlled environment, not one of walls and locks, but of immense, indifferent nature. The forest itself was to be the trap. The mask, if there ever was one, never dropped for Daniel. Or if it did so in a place with no witnesses. His final moments of agency were mundane. He pulled into the gravel parking area at the trailhead around 9 a.m. According to the logbook at the trail's entrance, which he signed with his name and the date, he was planning a 3-day, 2-night trip. He grabbed his fully loaded Osprey backpack from the rear of the Subaru. He locked the car. He walked to the head of the trail, a man on the cusp of an adventure, and was swallowed by the trees. There is no record of whether Trail Runners or Peak Seeker ever arrived. Their names do not appear in the logbook. The crime, if it was a crime, was executed with the chilling efficiency of silence. The forest is a place that keeps secrets. On that October weekend, the weather was clear and cool, perfect for hiking. The trail Daniel took follows the Wild Salmon River, a path cushioned by centuries of fallen needles. The air would have smelled of damp earth and pine. The only sound would have been the rush of the river and the whisper of wind through the high canopy. Did he meet his companions? Did they hike for a day or only an hour? Did they make camp by the river, sharing stories around a small fire? Or did the encounter turn dark within minutes of his arrival? Was there a disagreement, an accident, an ambush? The execution of the event is a complete blank. It is a story with the most crucial chapter torn out. All that is known is that Daniel Hayes walked past the trailhead sign, and in doing so, stepped out of the known world. The alarm was raised 300 miles away, in a quiet suburban home in Cleveland, Ohio. Sarah Hayes had a routine. Sunday evenings were for grading papers and talking to her brother. At 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. for her. Her phone was supposed to ring. On Sunday, October 11th, it remained silent. This was the first missed contact. It was a deviation from a pattern so ingrained that its absence felt like a physical presence. She tried not to worry. He was on a serious hike. Maybe they were running late. Maybe they decided to stay an extra night to take advantage of the good weather. She sent him a text message. "Hey, hope the hike was amazing. Call me when you get back to civilization." The message was never delivered. Her subsequent calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. His phone was off, or the battery was dead. Both were plausible explanations. By Monday morning, the plausible explanations began to feel thin. Daniel was meticulous. He was a planner. He had a job to be at. He would have known she would worry. Sarah's anxiety grew from a low hum to a frantic buzz. She called his office at Renfield and Associates. The receptionist confirmed he had not shown up for work and had not called. This was the moment her fear crystallized into certainty. Something was wrong. At 1:15 p.m. on Monday, October 12th, Sarah Hayes contacted the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. She was emotional but clear. She explained who her brother was, where he had gone, and who he was supposed to be with, providing the online handles she barely remembered. She explained that he was now more than 18 hours, overdue from his planned return and completely out of contact. She filed a missing person report over the phone, her voice tight with a terror she was trying desperately to control. The initial response from law enforcement was professional but measured. An adult man, an experienced hiker, was less than a day late from a wilderness trip. It was not, on its face, a 5-alarm fire. The desk sergeant was reassuring. Most of these cases, he explained, resolved themselves. The hiker emerges from the trail, tired and embarrassed, a few hours or a day later than planned. He promised to have a deputy check the trailhead for Daniel's vehicle. Deputy Mark Coulson was dispatched to the Salmon River trailhead. He arrived just before sunset. The gravel lot was empty, save for one vehicle. A dark green 1999 Subaru Forester. He ran the plate. It was registered to Daniel Hayes. The car was locked and undisturbed. Deputy Coulson peered through the windows. There was nothing inside that suggested a struggle or foul play. He walked to the trailhead kiosk and found Daniel's entry in the logbook. He was here, and he had not signed out. The discovery of the car transformed the situation. This was no longer a man who was simply late. This was a man who was officially missing in the vast wilderness of Mount Hood. A full-scale search and rescue operation was initiated. The case was assigned to Detective Miles Corbin. Corbin was a 15-year veteran with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, a man whose calm demeanor masked a sharp, intuitive mind. He had grown up in the shadow of these mountains and had worked his share of missing hiker cases. He understood the unforgiving calculus of the wilderness. A simple twisted ankle could become a death sentence if you were alone. He initially approached the Daniel Hayes case with the standard SAR playbook. His first priority was to find a man who was likely lost or injured. The possibility of foul play was a distant secondary consideration. Corbin's first move was to coordinate the search. By sunrise on Tuesday, the trailhead was a hub of activity. SAR volunteers in bright orange jackets assembled, poring over topographical maps. Teams were assigned grids. A helicopter was requested to perform aerial surveys. Corbin established a command post, a pop-up tent filled with radios and charts, the nerve center for the entire operation. He also sent a team to Daniel's apartment in Portland. They conducted a wellness check, finding the apartment exactly as Daniel had left it, neat, orderly, and empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no indications that he had planned to be away for a long time. His laptop was on his desk. This laptop became the first focus of the investigative side of the case. While the SAR teams combed the mountainside, Corbin's digital forensics unit began to follow Daniel's digital trail. They quickly found the PNW Ascents Forum. It was a frustratingly opaque world. The investigators read through months of Daniel's posts, building a picture of his growing involvement. They found the private message thread planning the final hike. It contained the screen names Trail Runners and Peak Seeker, but nothing more. No real names, no phone numbers, no personal information of any kind. The sophistication of the user's operational security was startling. They had used proxy servers and VPNs to mask their IP addresses. The forum itself was hosted on a server in Eastern Europe, a jurisdiction known for its lack of cooperation with international law enforcement requests. Subpoenas were sent, but the forum administrators were unresponsive. The digital trail went cold almost immediately. Trail Runner X and Peak Seeker were ghosts. They had no digital footprint that could be traced back to a real person. For all intents and purposes, they did not exist outside the confines of that forum. For 10 days, the search continued. Hundreds of volunteers and professionals scoured miles of rugged terrain. They rappelled into canyons, waded through frigid river water, and cut through dense undergrowth. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a discarded granola bar wrapper, not a shred of clothing. It was as if Daniel Hayes had vanished into the air. As the days wore on, the official search was gradually scaled down. The probability of finding him alive was approaching zero. The weather was turning, with the first autumn rains making the terrain more hazardous and washing away any potential tracks. The key discovery came 3 weeks after Daniel disappeared, long after the official search had been called off. A lone volunteer, a retired forester who had taken a personal interest in the case, was exploring an area far off the main trail, following a faint game path. He was about 1.5 miles from the trailhead, in a steep, heavily wooded ravine. It was there he found it, the smashed body of the Canon EOS 5D Mark II. The discovery of the camera was a seismic shift in the investigation. This was not the kind of damage that happens from an accidental drop. The casing was cracked in multiple places, the result of repeated, high-impact blows against a rock. It was an act of deliberate destruction, and the memory card, the one thing that might have contained photos of Daniel's companions or his final moments, was gone. Detective Corbin held the ruined camera in his gloved hands. This single piece of physical evidence confirmed his gnawing suspicion. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was a crime scene. Daniel Hayes had not simply gotten lost. Someone had made sure he would not be found, and they had tried to destroy the only evidence of their existence. The case had transformed into a major crime investigation. With the confirmation of foul play, the scope of the investigation widened dramatically. The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, while capable, was now dealing with a potential homicide with deeply complex digital elements. Detective Corbin made the call to request assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI's Portland field office agreed to provide support, primarily through their digital forensics and behavioral analysis units. The federal involvement brought new resources, but it did not bring new answers. The FBI's cybercrime experts confirmed what Corbin's team already knew. The anonymous hikers on the forum were, for all practical purposes, untraceable. They were digital phantoms who had meticulously scrubbed their tracks. Corbin's team, in parallel, began the laborious process of pattern recognition. They pulled files on every missing person case associated with the Mount Hood National Forest from the past 20 years. They expanded the search to include other national forests in Oregon and Washington. They were looking for a signature, a similar set of circumstances. A hiker who went missing after arranging to meet strangers online. A disappearance where a key piece of equipment, like a GPS or a camera, was found destroyed. They found a handful of cases that were superficially similar. A lone hiker who vanished in the Olympic National Park in 2002. a couple who disappeared from a trail near Mount Rainier in 2006. But the links were tenuous at best. There was no clear pattern, no definitive evidence of a serial predator. Each case was its own island of mystery. The effort produced a mountain of data, but no actionable intelligence. Frustrated by the digital and historical dead ends, Corbin turned to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit at Quantico. He sent them the entire case file, Daniel's profile, the details of his disappearance, the discovery of the smashed camera, and the information about the anonymous forum. He hoped they could build a profile of the person or people he was hunting. The report he received back was detailed, insightful, and ultimately crushingly broad. The profilers concluded that the unknown subject, or unsub, was likely a male with a high degree of intelligence and a meticulous, patient personality. He would be comfortable and highly skilled in a wilderness environment, able to navigate off-trail and survive in rugged conditions. He would possess significant technical savvy, understanding how to maintain complete online anonymity. His motivation was likely not robbery, as Daniel's expensive gear was left behind, save for the memory card. The motivation was about power, control, and the thrill of the act itself. The destruction of the camera was not just about destroying evidence. It was a symbolic act, a demonstration of dominance. The unsub was a psychopath, a predator who used the shared trust of the hiking community as his hunting ground. He could be a long-haul trucker, a seasonal worker, or even a professional who lived a quiet, unassuming life, his dark hobby hidden from everyone. The profile was a chilling portrait of a ghost. It told Corbin everything about the kind of person he was looking for, but nothing about who he was or where to find him. The active investigation dwindled. The leads dried up. The case of Daniel Hayes, which had begun with a flurry of urgent activity, slowly settled into the cold, hard stasis of an unsolved crime. Years began to pass. For Detective Miles Corbin, the case became a quiet obsession. The thick file box labeled Hayes Daniel never moved from the corner of his desk. It was a constant, physical reminder of his failure. It was the one that got away. Every few months, a tip would trickle in. Most were well-intentioned, but useless. A tourist would call, convinced they had seen a man matching Daniel's description in a diner 2 states away, 5 years after he vanished. A hiker would find a piece of old clothing or a tattered backpack in the woods and call the sheriff's office, their voice filled with a hopeful urgency that Corbin knew would inevitably lead to disappointment. The most insidious tips came from psychics. They would call Sarah Hayes directly, or the sheriff's office, weaving elaborate visions of where Daniel could be found. They spoke of caves near waterfalls, of hollow logs, of cryptic landmarks only they could interpret. Early in the investigation, Corbin had dutifully followed up on a few of these, driven by a desperate hope and the need to assure the family that every avenue was being explored. Each time, it led to nothing but wasted man-hours and a deeper sense of futility. He learned to politely thank them and file their premonitions away. Then there were the prison inmates. Every so often, a letter would arrive from a state penitentiary. An inmate, facing a long sentence, would claim to have information about the Hayes case. They would offer to trade the location of Daniel's body for a reduced sentence or better prison conditions. These were the most agonizing leads. They dangled the one thing Sarah Hayes wanted more than anything, bringing her brother home, and used it as a bargaining chip. Corbin had to treat each one as potentially legitimate. He would drive for hours to sit across a steel table from a convicted felon in a faded prison jumpsuit. He would listen to their stories, their voices a mix of bravado and desperation. They would spin tales of a chance encounter in the woods, of witnessing an argument, of hearing a confession from a cellmate long since transferred. Corbin would listen patiently, his internal lie detector finely tuned from years of experience. He would press for details, for facts that had not been released to the media. What was the brand of the camera? What was Daniel wearing? What was his online handle? Inevitably, their stories would crumble under the weight of these specific, verifiable questions. They knew only what they had read in the papers. It was a cruel, manipulative game, and Corbin had to play it every time, just in case one of them was telling the truth. None of them ever were. The most promising lead, the one that for a few weeks allowed a sliver of hope to penetrate the gloom of the cold case, came nearly 4 years after Daniel's disappearance. A man was arrested for illegal trapping and poaching in a national forest in southern Washington. During a search of his squalid remote cabin, deputies found a collection of driver's licenses, trophies taken from cars he had broken into at trailheads over the years. This immediately raised red flags. The man, a reclusive ex-logger named Silas Croft, fit the broad strokes of the FBI's profile. He was a skilled woodsman, lived off the grid, and displayed antisocial tendencies. Detective Corbin drove to Washington State to interview him. Croft was a hard man, his face a roadmap of resentment, his eyes wary and hostile. Corbin questioned him for hours. He asked about his whereabouts in October of 2009. Croft claimed he had no memory. Corbin showed him a picture of Daniel Hayes. Croft stared at it with blank indifference. For 2 weeks, Corbin and a team of Washington detectives dug into Croft's life. They searched his property again, this time with cadaver dogs. They cross-referenced his known activities with the dates of other unsolved disappearances in the region. They felt they were close. This was him. He had to be. The dogs found nothing. A deeper forensic analysis of the items in Croft's cabin turned up no connection to Daniel Hayes. And then the final blow, a gas station receipt found in the glove box of Croft's rusted pickup truck confirmed that on the day Daniel disappeared, Silas Croft had been buying fuel and supplies over 400 miles away, near the Idaho border. The alibi was ironclad. The promising lead evaporated into nothing. It was another dead end, another ghost chased into the fog. The disappointment was profound. It felt, to Corbin, like the case was actively fighting back, teasing him with possibilities, only to snatch them away. As the years stretched on, Corbin would periodically re-interview Daniel's family and friends. He spoke to Sarah Hayes every few months, at first to give her updates, and then, when there were no updates to give, simply to let her know he had not forgotten. Their conversations became a shared ritual of grief. He would ask the same questions, hoping the passage of time might have shaken loose a forgotten memory. Did Daniel ever mention anyone specific from the forum? Did he seem worried or anxious before the trip? The answers were always the same. He was excited. He was happy. He trusted them. The screen names Trail Runner X and Peak Seeker remained phantoms. After Daniel's disappearance, both accounts on the PNW Ascents forum went dormant. They never posted again. The forum itself, tainted by its association with the high-profile case, saw its activity dwindle. A year later, the domain expired and the site vanished from the internet, taking its digital secrets with it. There was no one to identify. There was no suspect to name. In 2018, 9 years after Daniel Hayes walked into the woods, Detective Miles Corbin retired from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office after more than 24 years of service. On his last day, his colleagues threw him a small party in the break room. They gave him a plaque and a fishing rod. At the end of the day, after everyone else had gone home, a young, sharp-eyed detective named Elena Rios came to his office to help him pack his personal effects. The last thing to go was the file box. It was thick with reports, maps, and transcripts, its cardboard sides softened with age. Corbin lifted it from his desk and held it for a moment. "This is the Hayes case," he said, his voice quiet. He handed the box to Detective Rios. It was heavier than it looked. "This is the one that got away," he told her. "I chased it for almost a decade. Don't let it get away from you." Rios took the box, her expression serious. She promised she wouldn't. The transfer was a passing of the torch, but it was also an admission of defeat. The case of Daniel Hayes was now someone else's ghost to hunt. There was no resolution. Justice is a concept that requires a final act, a verdict, a sentence. The Daniel Hayes case had only a beginning and a long, drawn-out middle. The evidence locker at the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office holds a single, sealed box pertaining to the case. Inside rests the fractured body of the Canon camera. It is a tangible link to an intangible crime, a piece of a puzzle with no solution. Over the years, the camera has been revisited by technology. In 2012, a new technique for lifting touch DNA was attempted on the fragments. The results were inconclusive, contaminated by the jogger who found it and the investigators who handled it in the early days. In 2019, on the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, Detective Rios sent the pieces to a private lab to see if any new imaging technology could recover data from the shattered internal electronics. The report came back negative. The damage was too catastrophic. The evidence remained what it had always been, a symbol of violent intent, its secrets locked away forever. There was no confession. There was only a profound and chilling silence. The person or people responsible for Daniel's disappearance never made a mistake. They never bragged to a friend. They were never caught for another crime that would link them back to that day in the forest. They simply committed their act and then resumed their lives, leaving a void of information that was as cruel as the crime itself. The absence of a confession meant the narrative had no villain. There was no face to hate, no name to curse. There was only the gnawing, endless question, who and why? No bargain for a plea was ever made because there was no one to bargain with. The desperate hope of the family and investigators for a resolution, any resolution, was never leveraged by a suspect seeking a deal. The offer was always on the table, a silent promise from the district attorney's office. Tell us where he is, and we will take the death penalty off the table. It was an offer made to an empty room. Daniel Hayes was never found. For 7 years, he was legally classified as a missing person. His bank accounts remained untouched. His social security number was never used. In 2016, following a petition by his sister Sarah, a judge in an Oregon courtroom officially declared Daniel Hayes dead in absentia. The legal proceeding was a sterile, procedural affair. It provided a death certificate, a necessary document for settling his estate. It provided a legal conclusion, but it did not provide a recovery. It did not bring him home. For his family, the declaration was a painful formality, a legal fiction that did nothing to fill the empty space at the dinner table. It was an acknowledgement of an ending they had never been allowed to witness. There was no day in court, no sentencing. The only sentence was the one served by those left behind, a life sentence of not knowing. It is a unique and torturous form of grief, one that exists in a state of perpetual limbo. It is grief without the finality of a funeral, without the certainty of a grave to visit. It is a hope that flickers and fades, but never fully dies. A hope that every phone call from an unknown number might be the one that brings news, good or bad. Years after Daniel vanished, Sarah Hayes wrote a letter. It was not to a newspaper or a politician. It was to her brother's killer, a person she did not know and could not name. It was her version of a victim impact statement, delivered not to a courtroom, but to the void. "You took my brother," she wrote, "but you did not just take his future. You took our past, too. You have turned every happy memory into a source of pain. Every photograph of his smile is a reminder of what was stolen. But what I want you to know, whoever you are, is that you did not erase him. We remember him. I remember him. And we will never, ever stop looking for him. We will never stop searching for the answer you have hidden. Your silence is your prison, but his memory is our freedom. She never sent the letter. She kept it in a box with his photographs, a testament to a conversation she would never get to have. A year after Daniel's disappearance, with the search long since concluded and the investigation gone cold, Sarah Hayes organized a memorial service. It was held not in a church, but at an outdoor amphitheater in a park outside Cleveland. There was no casket, only a large, framed photograph of Daniel on an easel. He was smiling, standing on a rocky outcrop, the mountains of Oregon spreading out behind him. The sky above the service was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Hundreds of people came. His parents, now frail and gray, sat in the front row. Friends from his childhood, from college, colleagues from his old job in Ohio and his new one in Portland. They spoke of his kindness, his quiet humor, his passion for his work. His boss from Renfield and Associates spoke of his immense talent, of the beautiful buildings he would have designed. Sarah spoke last. She did not speak of the investigation or of her anger. She spoke of her brother. She told stories of their childhood, of his terrible singing voice, of his unwavering support for her. She celebrated the man he was, not the mystery he had become. It was a funeral for a memory, an attempt to reclaim his narrative from the silence that had consumed it. In the years that followed, Sarah Hayes found a new purpose. Her grief, sharp and disorienting at first, slowly transformed into a quiet, steely resolve. She began volunteering for a national nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the families of missing adults. She started by manning a hotline, talking to people who were in the first frantic days of a nightmare she knew all too well. She had a unique qualification for the job. She spoke their language. She understood the hollow reassurances from law enforcement, the agony of waiting, the frustration of a search that yields nothing. Her work evolved. She became an advocate, a voice for the voiceless. She traveled to state capitals, including Salem, Oregon, to lobby for changes in how missing persons cases were handled. She argued for the creation of dedicated cold case units, for better funding for forensic genealogy, and for laws that would compel greater cooperation from tech companies in cases involving digital anonymity. Her quiet, dignified persistence was effective. In 2021, the state of Oregon passed a bill that allocated new funding for regional cold case task forces. It was unofficially nicknamed Daniel's Law by some of its supporters in the legislature. It was not the justice she had prayed for, but it was a legacy. Her brother's disappearance, a story defined by its lack of answers, was now helping to bring answers to others. She had built something tangible out of the void. The case of Daniel Hayes became a piece of dark folklore in the Pacific Northwest. It was a ghost story told around campfires, a cautionary tale for a new generation of hikers. The details became legend. The anonymous forum, the smashed camera, the man who dissolved into the forest. The story led to real changes in the hiking community. Major online groups instituted stricter identity verification policies. Clubs promoted the importance of leaving detailed itineraries and carrying personal locator beacons. The phrase, "don't pull a Hayes," became a grim shorthand among seasoned hikers for getting involved with strangers in the wilderness. The case was featured in long-form magazine articles, on true crime podcasts, and in a segment of a popular television show about unsolved mysteries. Each retelling kept his name alive, but each one also reinforced the central, terrifying mystery. Daniel Hayes became a public symbol of the unknowable. The antagonist remains a ghost. The person or people responsible for Daniel's vanishing were never found. their fate is a blank page. Are they dead? Are they in prison for some other, unrelated crime, their secret held tight in their chest? Or are they still out there, living a normal life? A neighbor, a coworker, someone you might pass in the grocery store. This is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the case. The monster has no face. The evil is anonymous. It could be anywhere or anyone. The absence of an antagonist means the story has no focal point for its fear and anger, which instead radiates outward, touching everything. Miles Corbin lived out his retirement in a small house on the Oregon coast. He fished, he gardened, but he never truly left the Hayes case behind. Every year, on the anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, he would make the long drive to the Salmon River trailhead. He would park his car and walk to the kiosk, where a laminated flyer with a faded picture of Daniel was still tacked to the board. He would stand there for a long time, looking into the dense wall of trees. He would think about the smashed camera, about the digital ghosts, about Sarah Hayes' unwavering voice on the phone. The forest held the answer. He knew it. But the forest did not talk. The case was the great failure of his career, a puzzle he had passed on to another detective, but one that he had never, in his heart, truly let go. It haunted him not with gore, but with the profound intellectual torment of an unsolved equation. The final moral of the story of Daniel Hayes is not a simple one. It is not a lesson about the triumph of justice or the cleverness of an investigation. It is a more somber and complex truth. It is a story about the profound human need for narrative, for a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the unique cruelty of a story that is denied its conclusion. We are conditioned to expect answers, to believe that truth will eventually surface. The Hayes case is a stark reminder that sometimes it does not. Sometimes the void remains. But the story is also about what we build in that void. It is about the persistence of memory against the erosion of time. Daniel Hayes was stolen, but his identity was not erased. It lives on in the love of his family, in the advocacy of his sister, and in the small but meaningful changes his absence inspired. Sarah Hayes could not find her brother, so she built a legacy for him instead. She took the most painful experience of her life and forged it into a tool to help others. A quiet, powerful act of defiance against the silence. This case serves as a chilling cautionary tale for our hyper-connected, yet paradoxically anonymous, world. It highlights the vulnerability that exists in the spaces where our digital and physical lives intersect. It reminds us that behind the screen names and avatars are real people, but their intentions are not always clear. It speaks to the ancient fear of the dark woods, updated for the 21st century, where the path into danger can begin with a simple, friendly message. Ultimately, the story of Daniel Hayes is a meditation on loss, but also on endurance. It is about the investigators who refuse to let a cold case die, the family members who refuse to stop speaking a loved one's name, and the quiet dignity of carrying on in the face of unbearable uncertainty. There is no catharsis, no final courtroom scene, no moment of triumph. There is only the long echo of a good man's absence, the quiet determination of those who remember him, and the unsettling truth that some questions are never answered. The search for Daniel Hayes is over, but the search for what happened to him, and for the meaning we can draw from his life, will never truly end.